LREA members, and happy Friday to you. Today we're going to talk a little bit about unionism and what it means to be part of a labor union, which is what the Little Rock Education Association is. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of labor unions and why they are so important to the economy and to the middle class. So the history of labor unions goes all the way back to the 18th century and the Industrial Revolution in Europe. During this time, there was a huge surge of new workers into the workplace, and they needed representation in order to be treated fairly and have safe working conditions. Of course, you know that European immigrants into the United States were plentiful, and so it's natural to think that those people would come to the United States with the expectation that they would have labor unions here as well. So in the United States history of unions, early workers and trade unions played an important part in the role for independence. Although their physical efforts for the cause of independence was ineffective, the ideas they introduced, such as protections for workers, better benefits, better wages, those became part of our American culture. And so what does that mean for the teachers union? Because generally speaking, that's the trade unions. So the history of the teachers union, specifically the NEA, which is what we are members of as members of LREA, dates back to 1857. In 1857, 43 educators gathered together in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to form the new National Teachers Association, which would eventually become the NEA. At the time, education was a luxury for most children in the United States, and for children of color, education was illegal. It was illegal to teach them to read and write. 4 years after the formation of the National Teachers Association, or NTA, 23 Ohio African American teachers came together and formed the earliest known Black Teachers Association, which would come to be called the American Teachers Association. Originally, the National Teachers Association was open to minority educators as long as they were men. No women were allowed to be members of the National Teachers Association. In fact, among the 43 founding educators, only one woman was present, and she was not recognized as a member, even though she was allowed to sign the founding documents. So, in 1867, the NTA lobbied Congress to establish the Federal Department of Education, which is what we have still today. Just a few years later, in 1869, the first woman became president of the NTA because in 1866 they finally opened membership up to women. So in 1870, the NTA changed its name and became the National Education Association. In the early years, the NEA primarily focused on addressing child labor and child labor laws, low salaries for teachers, unequal pay between women and men, and things like that. Eventually, they focused more on improving the quality of publication, advocating for civil rights and social justice issues, and more societal type things as well as educational. In 1959, Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin, passed the very first collective bargaining law for public employees, which includes teachers. Usually, when I say public employees, I'm talking about teachers, firefighters, and police. So, like I said, in 1959, Wisconsin passed the first collective bargaining law for public employees, which then allowed teachers to negotiate for better wages, working conditions, and benefits. We still enjoy that luxury today in Little Rock, even though we are a right-to-work state in Arkansas. We are recognized for the purpose of collective bargaining. So that is what allows us to negotiate with the school district. In 1926, the NEA and the ATA began working together as advocates for equal and equitable education for all children, especially black children. In 1966, the NEA and ATA met together at the Representative Assembly and agreed to a merger. The ceremony of the merger was held in Miami, which is where NEA was located at the time, and the NEA is now 3 million members strong and advocates for public schools and their employees and their students every single day. Currently, we have a president, a vice president, and a secretary-treasurer who are all females. In the history of America's trade and labor unions, the most famous union remains the American Federation of Labor, which was the AFL. It was founded in 1886 by Samuel Gompers. When it was at its strongest point, the AFL had approximately 1.4 million members. And the AFL is credited with successfully negotiating wage increases for its members and enhancing workplace safety for all of its workers. The Congress of Industrial Organizations, or the CIO, under John Lewis and the larger AFL Federation, underwent a huge expansion during World War II, and the AFL and CIO merged together to form the new AFL-CIO in 1955. Union membership and power peaked around 1970. And at that time, private sector union membership, which would be anything other than police, fire, and teachers, underwent a huge expansion during World War II. They began a steady decline that continues today. However, membership in public sector unions, which is us, continues to grow. According to the Department of Labor, the 2015 union membership number was 14.8 million nationwide. You know, we have to think about workers whenever we talk about unions, because a lot of the things that we enjoy as workers came from those people who came before us, such as weekends off, 40-hour work weeks, 8-hour work days, things like that. Those things were fought for by our union brothers and sisters who came before us, and we all benefit from that. Much like even non-members benefit from a union's collective bargaining power. For example, if we negotiate and get a raise during financial bargaining, it doesn't just go to the members, it goes to every employee in the group, and usually every employee in the district, because the administrators usually get it as well, even though we don't negotiate on their behalf. So, a lot of unions call those people freeloaders because they don't pay anything, but they benefit from the union's power. The fact that we have collective bargaining rights gives you as a union member more power than if you were to try to go in and talk to them as an individual to try to get a raise or a bonus or anything like that. That they know that we have a large number of members standing behind us, and so when we go in to talk with them, it's with the strength of all of you standing behind us. You also need to remember some of these benefits of union membership. Union employees make an average of 30% more than non-union workers. And 92% of union workers have job-related health coverage versus 68% of non-union workers. You're more likely to have a guaranteed pension, your teacher retirement, than non-union employees. And unions help protect employees from unjust dismissal, which means that our employees cannot be fired without just cause. And remember, we talked about all of that when we were going through the contract negotiations, and how the P&A is stronger or just as strong as Arkansas Teacher Fair Dismissal, which means you're not considered an at-will employee. At-will employees are usually administration, and they can be fired at any time for any reason. Your contract protects you, your P&A protects you from that. Union members also benefit from having the collective power to strike. Now, in Arkansas, as well as in, I believe, like 46 other states, striking is illegal. But that's kind of the whole point, is, that what you're fighting for is a big enough deal that you're willing to risk it and go on strike. And of course, a strike is when workers gather together to stop working, either in protest of labor conditions or as a bargaining tool during negotiations. So that's just a little bit of unionism history for you, and perhaps I'll revisit that at a later time. If you're interested in learning the NEA history, you can go to www.nea.org and click on our history, and it will help you learn all about the NEA history and all of the twists and turns that the NEA went through the years. It's pretty interesting reading. The same thing can be said for union history. If you're interested in learning about union history and some of the things that unions fought for over the years and won, just Google union history and you'll come to a lot of great websites and even documentary type photos, primary document photos of strikes and movements and things like that people took part in the past to fight for worker rights. So if that's something you're interested in, I encourage you to do that. And as far as knowing your history, just recognize that our union history is under attack right now. In the legislature yesterday, a bill was filed and that to take away collective bargaining rights. Now, obviously, that is a union-busting bill. There's no other word for that but union-busting, just like the payroll deduct bill was a union-busting bill. So that's two union-busting bills that have been filed this year. So we need to be aware of that. We need to engage with our family members, all those aunts, uncles, cousins, people that you have all over the state who may live in the areas where some of these legislators who are coming up with these bills live, and could put a bug in their ear, because a lot of times they will listen to their constituents more than they'll listen to people from Little Rock. So in the know today, you will see that there is information and links for you to contact your legislators to let them know how you feel. Feel free to share those links with your family members and ask them to speak on your behalf. Being able to collectively bargain in Little Rock is a huge deal. And if we lose that, that means that we will go to personnel policies. And there's not a lot of history of success on the worker side, on the teacher side and staff side with personnel policies. It's mainly an administratively driven machine. So do take that into consideration. Have a great weekend, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening.